Good morning and happy Monday to you. Hope you had a good weekend. Today we are going to talk about reflections. So I've got the notes already done. As you go through this video, please pause this video when you need to take a minute to write down what you see, or you have the option of printing out the PDF and following along as you go through this video with me. So I can't remember what day it was exactly. Last week we talked about translations. So there's different ways you can move shapes or points on a coordinate plane. And we talked about translations, which is where you move every point of a figure the same distance in the same direction. So you're going to move your x coordinate a number of spaces and your y coordinate a number of spaces, represented by A and B, however many units you decide. And so, let's see, let me shift this down. Your example was this polygon here in green, and these were the points. And the rule was to shift your x's 3. Positive 3 means you're going to the right, and your y was -6, which means you go down 6. So we took all of these points here and we plotted them. And then we added 3 to the x's and subtracted 6 from the y's, and we got these new values. So from here to here, here to here, here to here, and here to here. And you can see it on the graph. It shifted to the right and down, which makes sense. And then you had to translate just single points, depending on what the rule was. And then you had some Desmos practice with that, which I thought was super cool, and you did really well. So what we're going to look at is reflections now. There's a couple more ways you can move stuff, and we're just going to touch on a few. So reflection examples will be the title of this page, and then we have the definition. What is a reflection? It is where you fold or flip an object over a line. So if I had a circle here, and I had just drawn this circle with a nice big Crayola marker, and it was still wet from where the ink had just been put on the paper, and I drew a circle and I folded this paper in half, most likely it would transfer over here if it was still wet from where I drew it here. That would be its reflection. Also the same when you look in a mirror, it's the reflection of your face. And I know a lot of times you can use filters that show you the mirrored image of your face, and then it can flip it and you can see the other view of your face, which is kind of cool. But that's all that a reflection is. It's just a flipped image over a line. And so the original object or point would be called your pre-image. So if you had a triangle of 3 points, it would just be the image of the triangle ABC. The reflection is your image. So the original is the pre-image, the reflection is the image, and it's notated with that little prime symbol. So A prime, B prime, C prime versus just ABC. So again, at this point, let's not forget it is the same shape and the same size. It just faces opposite directions. So again, if I had drawn my circle here and folded the paper and it was over here, same size, same shape. It's just one is on the left and one is on the right. So they're just on opposite sides. So I'm just going to look at reflection over the x and y axis. You can reflect it over the y equals x line, but we won't get to that just yet. That'll be later next semester. I just want you to be familiar with this and get a little practice. So let's look at reflection over the x-axis first. When reflected over the x-axis, your point, and we know all ordered pairs are written x comma y, so whatever your point is becomes x comma negative y. So the biggest thing to remember is if it's reflected over the x-axis, the y-coordinate flips. So those are actually opposite. I know a lot of times people think, oh, if it's reflected over the x-axis, I change my x-coordinate, and that's actually wrong. So if we look down here at our example that I drew, if I want you to reflect this triangle over the x-axis and I give you these points, so A is -1, 1, B is -1, 3, And C is -3, 1. So that's this triangle right here that my right finger is pointing at. If I give you this triangle and I say reflect it over the x-axis, following this rule, you know, okay, I take these points and I just flip the y coordinate. So here, instead of it being a +1 for the y coordinate, it needs to become a -1. Nothing happens to my x coordinate. If you look, it's still the same. That's not what changes. The rule tells me only the y changes when I'm flipping over the x-axis. So it becomes -1, -1. This would become -1, -3 to be the opposite of 3. And this would become -3, -1 to become the opposite of 1. So I don't even look at my graph at first. I just look at the points here and I take every y value and I make it opposite. Now, when you come over here to graph, just look at these points and graph these points. So I'm going to go -1, -1. And I know on my x-axis, and we talked about this in the very beginning, anything to the left is negative, anything to the right is positive. We know on the y-axis, anything going up is positive and down is negative. You have notes on this back on page, oh gosh, I don't know, 2, back on page 2. The coordinate planes, how it's divided, the x and the y-axis, where the origin is, we plotted points, all that goodness there. So when I'm plotting these, I'm going to go to the left and down to get my new A. Then I'm going to go to the left 1 and down 3 to get my new B. Then I'm going to go to the left 3 and down 1 to get my new C. And you'll see it's literally flipped over the x-axis. So if it's not looking like it flipped at the axis we're talking about, then you've reflected it the wrong way. You should literally be able to fold your paper at this x-axis, and these two should meet up. So if I were to fold my page in half right here on this axis, those two should touch because they're reflected. And it's literally the opposite for a reflection over the y-axis. Again, if you need to pause this video at any point while you're writing this down, please feel free. So when reflected over the y-axis, the point that you have, whatever it may be that's given to you, x comma y, is now actually going to become -x, y. So that means that the x-coordinate flips. So again, for reflection over the y-axis, my x-coordinate is flipping, meaning I'm going to make it opposite. So if I ask you to reflect this triangle over the y-axis and I give you these points, and I know these are the original points because they're not primed. These are A prime, B prime, C prime. So these are the reflected that I'm about to get to. So if you just have these points and you plot them, okay, I'm going to cover up my answers. If I plot A, which is -2, 1, I'm going to come over here and I always, when you're graphing, you always start in the middle. This is 0 on the x, 0 on the y. You don't know where to go unless you're starting at 0. You can't just put your finger down and start counting. There has to be a start point, and that's always your origin. So I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to go -2, and I know the first number is talking about my x-axis, so I'm going to go to the left 2, and then 1, up 1, and that's A, and that's where I plotted A. For the second point, B, I'm going to go, starting at 0 again, I'm going to go left 1, because it's -1, and that's on my x-axis, and then 5, and that's a +5, so I go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's B. And then C is -5, 1. So the first letter is talking about my x-axis, the second is my y-axis. So I'm going to go -5 and up 1. And you'll see A, B, C. There it is. And then I connect my dots. That's my triangle that matches up with these points based on understanding that the first number is my x-coordinate, the second number is my y-coordinate, this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis. So that's how I'm able to do all this because I understand how everything is labeled. Now to reflect it over the y-axis this way means I've got to change my x-coordinates. So in this example, -2, 1, -2 is my x-coordinate. I've got to flip that. What's the opposite of -2? positive 2. Nothing changes about my y coordinate. So now it's positive 2, 1. The opposite of negative 1, which is my x coordinate, is positive 1. And then for C, the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. So these would be my new points. Nothing happened to my y coordinates. And now I'm just going to plot them. So you'll see over here, I did it in orange. I went positive 2 on the x-axis, 1, 2, and then I went up 1. Then for B, I went positive 1, up 5. And then for C, I went positive 5, up 1. And remember, you always go right or left, up or down, based on what we know about ordered pairs. So this, if I literally folded my paper right here on this y-axis, these two triangles should be a reflection of each other, and they are. And that is what a reflection is. It's simply changing either the x or the y coordinate based on which axis you're reflecting over. So for today, I will upload a picture of this if you'd like to print it out and just put it in your notes. But what I need you to do for today's assignment would be just get these notes down. So again, if you just printed them, you just need to glue them in and take a picture of them in your notebook and comment one thing that you thought was cool that you learned today. And it could be, I thought it was cool that you connected the reflections on the graph to a reflection of myself in the mirror. Or I learned that the apostrophe after the letters means prime. This is A prime, B prime, C prime. It could be something from your notes. You learned that a reflection is to fold or flip an object. You learned that reflections are the same shape and the same size, but they're on opposite sides of a line. It could be anything. So just comment something you learned from today's notes, and tomorrow we're going to do some practice with this. And so I'll be asking you to reflect triangles or shapes that I have over the x or the y-axis, and we'll work on that. I do want to do this real quick. Add this to your, well, you'll be getting this once I'm done, so you won't have to add it. But remember, this got reflected over the y-axis. Forgot to write that right there. And that's it for today. So make sure you get these notes down and you comment something you learned today from these notes that you thought was neat, and upload a picture of your notes as well. And when you do this, it can either be handwritten notes in your notebook that you upload a picture of, printed notes that you glued into your notebook. Either one is fine. And then you need to comment under this assignment something you learned from today. It could be something I said, a cool connection I made, or something from your notes that you wrote down.